spoilers ahead.
Pearl is a 2022 horror film that serves as a prequel to 2022's other smash hit horror movie, X. It's directed by Ty West, and he wrote it alongside the movie's star, Mia Goth. Normally, this is when I present both sides of the argument regarding a movie's critical reception. I say some people felt this movie was great, while other people felt this movie was not great, and then we examine the plot. But I'm going to come at this review from a different angle. I'm a really big fan of this movie, so once we're finished reviewing the plot, I am going to show you why I think Pearl is the best horror movie of 2022. Let's go.
The plot.
The movie opens in the middle of a flu pandemic in Texas in 1918, and we meet Pearl, who's living with her German immigrant parents on a farm you'll already be familiar with if you've watched X. Pearl's husband Howard's away with the war, her father's paralyzed and speechless, and her mother's animated and constantly shouting. So Pearl dreams of replacing the life she's stuck with one she imagines would make her much happier. One day, she sees a movie at the local cinema and becomes obsessed with the idea of becoming a chorus girl. Naturally, her overbearing mother hates the idea, but Pearl's not likely to pay much attention to that, given her hobbies of murdering innocent farm animals and beating up her paralyzed father. Eventually, Pearl ends up friendly with the projectionist, and the pair end up sweet on each other. So one day, on her way home as she's riding past a cornfield, she pops into the cornfield to ride the neighbor's scarecrow. And if I was making sweet, spicy love to my neighbor's scarecrow in the middle of a cornfield in Texas in 1918, I'd have been all like, "Did you seriously think I was gonna..." In the last few months, I have spent every spare second I have trying to entertain you people free of charge. I've worn dresses and wigs and makeup, and I haven't even asked you to like and subscribe in return. And of course, one day I would love to have a few thousand subscribers that are even half as cool as the ones I've got already, and I will continue to work hard until that happens. But I refuse to degrade my—
Get that sweet ass on over here. Come on now, baby.
Yes, Ray Bolger, I will be there as soon as I've done the video. When she gets home, her mother tears into her for taking change that didn't belong to her to pay for her matinee movies. Pearl's sister-in-law, Mitzi, swings around for a quick visit. She tells Pearl about a dance audition being held for a troupe that's going to tour the USA. And that seems exactly like what Pearl needs to get her the life she so desperately wants. And all the excitement's got her so excited, she sneaks out to meet the projectionist that night. Only this time, he shows her a naughty Euro flick. Then he encourages her to go after her dreams because she'll only be young once. But she tells him she can't just abandon her family, which is a lovely sentiment. And then she says she wishes they'd all just die. Which is not as lovely, but it was equally heartfelt. At the dinner table, Mother finds a program Pearl lifted from the movie theater, and not surprisingly, Mother's none too happy about it. So they gets to fightin', and the fightin' turns physical, and Pearl shoves her up against the hearth, and Mother gets to catchin' on fire. The resulting burns look pretty serious, so Pearl leaves Daddy sitting in silence with his meatloaf while she drags her mother down the stairs in hopes she'll maybe feel a little bit better in the cooler basement. And once that's sorted, she heads to the cinema to give the projectionist a proper hello. The next morning, the projectionist brings Pearl home to get her ready for the big dance audition. And when he gets there, things are less than picturesque. She acts peculiar and he catches her out in a big stupid lie. So he leaves. But nobody leaves on Pearl, so she flies into a sexy fit of rage. She finishes him off with a pitchfork and Norman Bateses him right into the pond with her best pal, Theta the Gator. Then she dolls herself up in one of Mother's purtiest dresses. And she dolls Daddy up too, before she smothers him to death with a pillowcase. Because everybody knows you have to have clean underwear on in case Pearl sends you to the pearly gates unexpectedly. Then she meets Mitzi for the audition, and she dances her crazy little heart out. But things were different in 1918 America, so she's rejected for being too old and not blonde enough and not American enough. She doesn't take that well at all. So sister-in-law Mitzi consoles her as best as she can and brings her back to the farm. But after suggesting Pearl open up about everything that's upsetting her, Mitzi realizes she's bit off a little bit more than she can chew. At the kitchen table, Pearl gets absolutely everything off her demented, murderous chest in the best monologue I've seen since Ellen Burstyn justified amphetamine abuse in Requiem for a Dream. Terrified at Pearl's admissions, Mitzi tries heading for the hills, but Pearl surprises her by revealing she's aware Mitzi won the audition, and she forces her to admit it. When she does, Pearl chases her out of the house with an axe and a face that would make Jason Voorhees sprint back to Camp Crystal Lake. Mitzi's made into crocodile feed before Pearl pops down to the basement for some quality time with Mother's body. And now that Pearl's decided Mother was right all along and telling her she should make the best of what she has, Pearl puts her energy into making a comfortable home for Howard to return to. And the next morning, when Howard returns unexpectedly, he finds Pearl in the kitchen with her putrefied parents gathered around the table for a lovely meal of maggoty pork, ending the movie with a Norman Rockwell family portrait, painted with spoiled paint and a rotten brush. And there you have it, folks, the plot to Pearl. I've already said, for me, this is the best horror movie of 2022. Now I'm going to show you why I think that. As a director, if you're making a prequel like Pearl, you're starting at the bottom of a fairly steep hill. But before you start tackling all the prequel challenges, you need to make sure your movie functions as a standalone. And as a standalone horror movie, Pearl ticks all of my boxes.
What do you mean, boxers, baby?
Well, thank you for asking, Ray Bolger, who would have realized I'm still working on this video if he only had a brain. Beyond all the obvious stuff like avoid cliches and too many red herrings and anything James Wan does, I want to watch things that scare me. I do not want to be told when it's time to be scared. Tone and tension and atmosphere thrive when they're allowed to fester in the privacy of our own heads. At no point in this movie did any of the characters tell us Pearl's a scary nutjob. We can infer that entirely from her actions. We're also not told things aren't going to work out well in the end for the same reasons. Ty West gets this, and I think directors like Fede Alvarez would be wise to take a bloody page out of his book. A huge element of great horror is the removal of our safe places. And what's safer than a collection of trusting family members gathered around the dinner table at the family farm in broad daylight? The environment in Pearl is as safe as it can be. The story world is completely normal. Even the arguing between Pearl and her mother's typical of a head-in-the-clouds teenager and an overbearing, overworked mother. Until Pearl snaps. It doesn't matter if the horror takes place in a spaceship or a small town. It doesn't matter if your monster's a werewolf or a weirdo next door. What does matter is that it's possible. You can create a fantastic world with all manner of creatures and madmen and lunacy going on in it, as long as it contains no contradictions. If you can imagine it happening in real life, the directors nailed it, and Pearl's absolutely plausible. Notice I didn't say likable, although that works too. Remember the third guy to get killed by the machete in Friday the 13th on Elm Street Part 21? Of course you don't. Nobody does. Remember Alex Wolff's Peter Graham in Hereditary and what happened to him? Or Roy Scheider's Chief Brody in Jaws? I certainly do. Pearl the movie focuses intensely on Pearl the character. And although few people in the audience can probably relate to her entirely, her emotional struggles are very real and very relatable. Establishing that relatability allows the audience to stick with a main character who pitchforks guys and girls and geese for fun. Music doesn't automatically mean John Carpenter's piano keys. Often, something completely unscary works just as well, if not better, depending on how uncanny you can get it. Tyler Bates and Tim Williams' score acts like a barometer of Pearl's surging and recessing moods. It's like she's conducting the orchestra the way she conducts the thunder and the lightning, only she's not aware of it. Pearl's a story that cranks up its horror to demonstrate its point. What is its point? I don't think I've seen a less abstract portrayal of the dark side of the American dream. Pearl sees her mother as a monster, but is there better advice than make the most out of what you have? And when Pearl competes with her Shirley Temple sister-in-law, of course things weren't going to work out for her. That's exactly what her mother was trying to prepare her for. And finally, the movie ends with a failed family torn to pieces by the American dream, rotting at the table around a feast of spoiled food. You don't need a degree in film snobbery to interpret the picture Ti West was painting. In addition to being a great standalone story, Pearl's also a fantastic prequel. That's a very rare thing, especially nowadays. Most of them fail before the curtain even rises because the directors don't seem to understand what makes a good prequel. You have to set things far off in the past. If you set your prequel far enough back, the audience will be less likely to find inconsistencies with events and behaviors. Both Pearl and her husband Howard are kids in the prequel and decrepit old pensioners in X. There's a whole lifetime between the two of them. Everyone knows anything can happen in a lifetime. You have to preserve the original material. This prequel feels like an accurate account of what caused Pearl and Howard to act the way they did in X. As obvious as this might sound, some directors don't get it. The people who watch prequels are usually fans of the original. So if you're going to take money from fans of the original, your prequel should adhere to the conventions of the original story. And if you feel the need to make major changes to the historical events or the characters of the lore, you'd better have a good reason. Because if you don't, you'll need to justify why you didn't just come up with something original yourself. You need to keep your focus personal. Another huge challenge you face with prequels is that everyone knows what happens after the movie ends. That robs you of a lot of opportunity to create suspense. To sidestep this, Pearl focuses on the development of the titular character. This gives X fans a much deeper understanding of the character, along with a full explanation of her extreme behaviors later in life. And finally, it's a worn-out expression, but you have to subvert audience expectations. X presented Pearl and Howard as a murderous, twisted backcountry couple with very little explanation, and it worked just fine like that. But had the prequel shown Pearl acting the same for no real reason, it would have been pointless. So instead, Ti West drilled down into the genesis of the couple by showing us Pearl's been this way her whole life, because the pressures of life itself caused her to crack. And when life itself is the cause of your psychopathy, it's very easy to accept the resulting behaviors as a lifelong thing. Pearl the sequel answers any questions X presented us with about Pearl and Howard. It wastes no time answering questions nobody asked. It doesn't bother with stupid cameos intended to appease fans of X. And finally, above and beyond everything I've just said about Pearl as a standalone and a prequel, Mia Goth's acting is the best I've seen all year, and possibly beyond that. So even though it's only the start of November, for me, Pearl is the horror flick of 2022. If you disagree, just tell me why in the comments. Until next...
Like and subscribe to help grow this sweet-ass channel.
Until next time, folks. It's me, Johnny, from that thing you just watched. If you enjoyed it, go down there and smash me in the face to subscribe. And if you want to watch another thing, there's one right there. Do it!